The PRovoke Podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.
Hello everyone and welcome to the PRovoke Media Podcast. This is Arun Sudhaman, Editor-in-Chief at PRovoke Media, and we are very lucky to be joined today by Aman Gupta, who's co-founder and managing partner at Strategic Partners Group, otherwise known as SPAG. Aman, how are you?
Very well, Arun. Thanks a lot for having me here. It's a pleasure to be a part of this media podcast.
It's your first podcast, I believe.
It is my first podcast. I think till now I have reserved most of my commentary in a form of either being part of the webinars or writing articles. So really excited and I would say a bit jittery on this stuff. And also just one and which you are aware of, that is the SPAG now is SPAG is a Fin Partners company. So
of
my
course,
new role
indeed,
is managing partner Health Asia, apart from managing Fin Partners
Wow.
in India.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, it was big news, and hopefully your first podcast will be relatively painless. Thanks for coming on. We are going to talk today about some of the big changes we have seen as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've talked about the implications and impact of the pandemic in many different ways, actually, but we have tended to focus actually on the impact across the board, across corporates, across different kinds of companies. But today we're going to talk about your area of expertise, which is the impact on healthcare, the impact on health systems, and in particular this idea that the pandemic has really highlighted how fragmented healthcare systems are. It has demonstrated the burden on patients, and perhaps it has reminded everyone of the value of communications within that kind of equation. So I wonder if we could start by, if you could perhaps set the scene for us. I mean, when you say that health systems are fragmented, how have we seen that from the pandemic, and what does that mean from a communications perspective?
Thanks, Arun. And I think the topic which we are conversing today, I think we should have been discussing over the last so many decades, because let's be real, health is the core to the mankind per se. A healthier world and healthier planet is something which will have its implication on everything, whether it's our economy, whether it is our trade. So we need to look at health as the top priority. So the health of the humanity, the health of the planet, the animal health, all of this sort of comes together. And if we really need to be the future and a humanity which survives the future and is able to thrive on this planet Earth, health has to be a kind of a core area of focus for us. Now, if we just look at where we are currently, in the past, most of the focus of the health systems was to focus on three stakeholders. People who will benefit best from the medication or from the healthcare per se, which in largely this case will be the patients. The second will be your physicians, people who are part of the delivery ecosystem, who are, say, our so-called subject matter experts who would help make that decision in terms of what kind of a care, what kind of medication needs to be provided. And third is the investors, the people who the companies who are investing into these solutions has to report back into. So those were the three people, and communication needs to play a role to ensure that are we touching base with each of these three stakeholders, getting them the right information, and really trying to push, saying that if there is a new innovation, are these people getting that innovation per se. What has happened is that things have changed. Apart from these three, we have more stakeholders who have a key role to play in ensuring the access to care happens. So you have the payers, which is a huge stakeholder group, like who is paying for it. And second is my regulators. In terms of every economy, the regulators are different, the regulations are different. Third is your influencer groups like patient advocacy groups. In the last decades, we have the rise of the empowered patient and the patient advocacy groups who would like to put their point of perspective in front of the stakeholders. And then, of course, you have the policy makers who are defining what kind of health systems shall we be focusing on, and few more stakeholders. So the stakeholder ecosystem has changed. And what has happened in that particular case is that if you need to ensure that access to care happens, you need to connect the dots. And it's very important that each of these stakeholders are conversing with each other, because if they are not talking to each other, the quality, the cost, and the outcomes of the healthcare will get depleted, or it will be kind of a, subpar, and that's what impacts the patient. So when we say the health ecosystem is fragmented, what we are saying is that these stakeholders are not talking to each other. Are not a collaboration which is happening. And therefore, from a communication perspective, what's very important is that how do we help them navigate this complex ecosystem? How do you ensure you're able to get them to talk to each other and ensure that they are going not in the silos with their own kind of a limited view, but they're looking at a much more broader view, and they're able to therefore focus on what shall be the right priority, which is to ensure that we are able to deliver health, we're able to make that accessible, and we're able to build a healthier societies.
And what are the risks if all of these different stakeholder groups aren't talking to each other? What are the kind of negative implications of that kind of an approach?
So let's say, for example, if I am a patient and I am given a prescription, and Arun, you might have sometimes sort of seen this in your own perspective, and I go to a pharmacy, and depending upon whether I'm going to a pharmacy in the US or I'm going to a pharmacy in the Europe or in Asia, there might be a possibility the pharmacist might say that the drug which you have been prescribed, that either it's not available to me, or in a particular case the payer does not give you the access to this particular drug, so I will have to give you either a different prescription or you will have to pay for yourself, right? So depending upon what is the experience I may have, so what is happening is what I am supposed to get it, what is supposedly the right prescription or the right treatment, I may not get access to the right treatment option, and there might be a switch which happens at certain point of time, or might be given a kind of a non-medical switching which might be happening. That's what's resulting is in terms of the quality of care might be going down. My health outcomes may not be what I'm kind of expecting, and therefore also the overarching cost of health being delivered goes up. So if they're not talking the basic philosophy of what health should be, which is my quality, lower cost, and ensuring my outcomes are the best, all three of them will get impacted in this case.
Yeah. So the burden falls on the patient,
It does.
or on the person. And as an agency, as a communicator who's very active in this space, how can you work to try and connect all of these groups more closely? I mean, are you working more often than not on behalf of specific types of groups? Are you seeing kind of specific examples of greater cooperation in this area?
Well, I think more than an agency, I think as a role of a health communicator, I personally believe it goes beyond just the mandate what we get from our clients. Anybody who is in the health communication, they have a much larger purpose to build a healthier society. And I think that's when I am conversing with the leadership across the overarching healthcare continuum, across the globe. What we are asking the decision makers is to ensure that the communication should be part of your strategic thinking, and it should not be a kind of an afterthought. So if I am focusing on a particular therapy, or if I'm focusing on a particular solution, then the role of the communication starts from the day I would like to sort of go and innovate into something, because I need to understand therefore who are the stakeholders who will be my decision makers, who are the people who will play the role of the influencer, who are the people who might be kind of a barrier in able to ensure the access to the care is happening. What are their perceptions?
Okay.
What are their attitudes? Now, this is the conversation which we found not happening so often as it should be happening. And then when you have a solution, it's kind of an afterthought that because now we have a solution, and it's still going to what I said in the beginning, the traditional thing, I'm going to talk to the patient, I'm going to talk to physicians, and I'm going to investor. That is a very siloed approach. It's a very myopic approach. We
Right.
need to look at all the stakeholders, understand their perceptions, their attitudes, their behavioral patterns, and then starting engaging with them much before you bring in a solution into the market. And therefore, and you have to ensure that you are building communication ecosystem. It's not just about sharing the news. You have to provide a communication ecosystem where the information is available and accessible in the language, in the format which the different stakeholders are able to get as and when they want it, and are able to get the information which they're able to understand also. So this is not just about saying I'm going to run a campaign because I have a solution. The role of the communicator, whether it is an agency or in-house, has to be in the boardroom along with the leadership to say we have a much larger purpose to play, and that purpose is about what our solutions, and if my solutions are sustainable, we also need to understand that it connects back to the larger corporate purpose of, am I being true to environment, am I sustainable, what am I really doing at the ESG level.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense. But it sounds like, I mean, the mere fact that you have brought this up makes it sound like it's not happening often enough. Do you see much evidence of this kind of collaboration? Do you feel confident that it will happen more in the future? Do you think that these different groups are keen to collaborate more?
Okay, so I think it's happening to some extent. So there is it's not a completely a kind of a lost hope per se. I think there are we do see organizations, we do stakeholders sort of coming together to have this kind of a conversations happening. Having said that, I think there is still a long way to go. It is something which should be part of the corporate philosophy or corporate thinking or stakeholder thinking. So, and I'm not just putting it on the private sector. I think it has to be at the government level. It has to be at the patient level. It has to be at a payer level. Every stakeholder needs to realize that they cannot work in isolation. They need to work collaboratively with the other stakeholders if the core purpose of building a healthier society is something which they are envisioning. So that's part one of it. Now, if we just look at from a future perspective, I think what gives us a more hope is there are technological interventions which are happening. And these technological interventions are trying to bring these conversations together. There are organizations which have tried to look at this as a problem statement and say, can technology be an enabler in bringing these conversations together? We are currently, let's say, working with a certain set of clients in Asia who are trying to use technology to say that when information gets transitioned from one layer to the another, the information is seamlessly transferred, and the care of the patient is sort of taken properly. Just to sort of give you an example, when you, let's say, move from an emergency room into a normal room, there has to be a proper transition of the information for the patients, and everything.
Right.
And looking at the lack of health infrastructure which came out during the COVID, we do figure out that there is times when the information is not seamlessly passed on, and it can therefore have an impact on the patient and the care being provided. I think this is where, how do we need to invest into the health and the role of communications to say this is important, right? It has to be sort of brought out
Right.
again and again, and that's where I think we sort of can play a role. And it has to be something which is kind of seen as the way that climate change is being considered, because climate change again is seen as an area where everybody has to come together to make a difference. But we do realize that the climate
Right.
change has an impact on health. And if you look at the fact that there are floods happening in Pakistan, or if you have a raging fires happening in the California side of it, each of them will have an impact on the health. So health is not in isolation. It is connected to every other aspect of our planet. And corporates which
Sure.
are in the health needs to be focused, but corporates and stakeholders which are not even connected to the health directly has an equal responsibility to say what can be done to strengthen our health ecosystem.
Yeah, it seems like it's more like it's everyone's responsibility, and I think everyone is far more aware of that. If we're talking specifically about Asia, obviously you have a lot of complexity here, whether geographic, socioeconomic, language, different levels of technological maturity, kind of understanding of healthcare issues in general varies wildly, for even within countries and then from one country to another. I could imagine a healthcare communicator looking at that and concluding it's too difficult to bring everyone together and to do it sustainably and consistently and effectively across all these markets. What are your thoughts?
Well, Arun, you rightly said Asia is a very complex geographical ecosystem. It's not one geography per se. It's multiple geographies just sort of coming together in a one larger land, space per se. And I think that has always been our guidance to our clients and organizations who we work with across the globe. That when you look at Asia, you need to look at Asia not just as a one uniform geography, but you need to understand the diversity and the uniqueness which Asia has to offer. Just the fact that two-thirds of the world's population is in Asia, 50% of land mass is in this part of the world, and some of the biggest economies. If I look at the top five economies per se, I think two or three of them will be in Asia, whether it's Japan
Yeah.
or China or in India. So the time of Asia is now. And if the global organizations which are looking at what their future is, that they have to ensure that they understand Asia. And when you have to understand Asia, you need to work with individuals and organizations who are embedded in Asia and who understand as you rightly said, the socio-economic diversity which is there, the language diversity which is there, the health infrastructure diversity which is there, the
Right.
health
Cultural.
financing diversity is there, the cultural diversity which is there. And therefore, when we as the healthcare specialist, communication advisor to our clients, we would look at a much more structured framework to say where you're sort of trying to go. We need to understand what success looks like to you, and within that, therefore, looking at each geography, we try to define who my stakeholders are. We do enough research and insights to find behavioral patterns. We understand the backgrounds and attitudes of the people, and accordingly develop the right kind of messaging. We, as and you would have heard me sort of talking about, is that we believe ourselves as a channel agnostic or an omni-channel agency. We need to look at channels the way our audience are consuming. Besides that, I think the other part which we have believed that we are not just a kind of a go-to agency, who would do what you're asking us to do, but we have believed in being part of the health ecosystem. And so
Yeah.
therefore we take upon ourselves to come out with insights. We take upon ourselves to shape what the future would look like. So whether it is our healthcare comms report in the past, or the recent conversation which we are seeing in terms of what is really are the focus area for different stakeholders. And we would continue to look at such kind of a partnerships with the organizations where we can all come together
Yeah.
to really ensure this fragmented health ecosystem. We are able to get them to talk to each other and build a much more robust healthcare infrastructure where they're talking to each other, and at least ensuring that the outcomes and the cost and the quality is kind of taken care of, because that's what is required for the planet. And if we don't, then of course, we have had one pandemic. It's not saying that we may not have, but more than the pandemic, it's about the fact that we need to ensure that the health is delivered to the people in the best possible way. We have the right technology, we have the innovation. What is required is a more seamless collaboration amongst different stakeholders.
Yeah, sure. Is there enough trust amongst different groups? And I ask this question because not to put pharmaceutical companies necessarily under the spotlight, but whenever we talk about healthcare, we have to talk about, I think, the trust in big pharma, number one. And also, as we've seen from the pandemic, it really has, I think, reinforced government's role as the kind of trusted broker, the kind of ultimate arbitrator when it comes to providing healthcare information. Do you feel that now, here we are 2 years later, I think initially there was a lot of goodwill towards pharma companies. Do you think that's helped in terms of trust, or do you think we're actually we're beyond that and it's going to remain a challenge once again?
So I think in terms of definitely the pharma and the health tech industry rose up to the occasion when the COVID sort of hit the humanity per se. They sort of went way beyond to ensure drugs are accessible, that we have access to the health technologies as it is required. We saw innovations happening because for whatever the gaps which were there in the health infrastructure. So it definitely lifted the persona of the industry. And that, I think, is an opportunity which still exists for this industry. But they need to continue to ensure that they don't lose on this particular path. So they need to, as I said in the beginning, they need to look at not just saying, I'm gonna, kind of innovate and put out a pill in the market and my role is complete. We need to ensure that it's not just innovating a kind of a pill or a tablet or a new health technology, but ensure also that we work closely with the regulators, the payers, the patient advocacy groups, so that the access to what you have built is made available. Because we have enough innovations, sometimes the access becomes a key challenge. And for that, thinking the role of the comms from the beginning and at this particular stage, I think this is a huge opportunity for this industry to showcase what they are able to offer and what their larger purpose is. So they do have a very good kind of a thinking in terms of, if I look at the leadership of any of the top biopharma or a health tech company, their intent is in the right direction. They are sort of thinking in the right direction. It's just that they're not communicating enough, or they're not able to explain their purpose to their stakeholders and getting them to sort of saying, I'm the one which is will act as a catalyst to take you all along with us in the larger goal of ensuring we build a healthier world.
And on the part of the consumer, do you see a change in expectations as a result of the last 2 years? Do you see any significant changes? And how do you see that impacting the way that patients or consumers view, for example, pharmaceutical companies, public health, even payers and regulators? Because you would imagine that after such dramatic events, there will be some changes.
So let's look at consumers in its large, in its totality, because health is just not about treatment. It's about, having a healthier society. So it's sort of about, am I able to sort of, understand my, health needs from the beginning? So level of awareness which I have about my health needs, to my ability to go and get myself diagnosed in case I feel there is something wrong, to getting the right experts advice, to then of course treatment management, and so on and so forth. So consumer at every stage is, health sort of has a role to play there. uh, I won't say just the 2 years. I think over the last couple of years, the consumers have become much more informed and much
Mm.
more empowered, who are trying to sort of say that I need to be part of decision making.
Mm-hmm.
From the past, where I would just take the expert counsel from my medical doctor on its face value, they are now much more involved into decision making. They do their own research, they do their own conversation amongst peer to peer. And I think that is a huge opportunity. So it's not in any way I would say is a negative, because when you have a more informed consumer, they are able to take a much more better choice in terms of what's right for them. This is where, if the organizations are bringing in your solutions, they can engage with them to inform and educate, so that they can make the right informed decisions. It's similar with the policy makers and regulators. As you take policy decisions, having these people as a part of your thinking process, as a part of the larger policy making, you have groups which should have a seat on the table, who should be working closely with the policymakers to ensure that your policies are aligned to the needs of the consumer and the patients. And as you look at investing
Mm-hmm.
into what shall be my future health infrastructure ecosystem should look like, such kind of individuals and organizations can help define what shall be the priority. And specifically across the globe, I won't just say Asia, every geography is very
Mm-hmm.
different, their needs are different, because they are at a different stage of evolution on their healthcare. There are which may be very evolved. So, for example, if you look at Japan as a market, it does has a strong health infrastructure, but their challenges are now very different. So, you
Mm-hmm.
have an aging population. The access to expert advice is limited. So you have a different challenge, or the cost of delivering healthcare is going up. So how do the policymakers are now trying to understand what can I really do to reduce that aspect of it. If I
Mm-hmm.
therefore look at a different market, let's say in Indonesia, it will have a very different channel. Or if I look at
Mm-hmm.
markets in the Europe or the US. So the thinking here is that you need to work along with these people, and they are becoming much more informed. They want to be
Mm-hmm.
part of a decision making. And again, sort of going back to having a communication ecosystem, where you're able to converse with them in a manner, in a time, and on a platform which they're able to get, would only help us strengthen the health ecosystem.
Mm. All of this depends on information flow. You talked about how consumers are doing their own research now. Sometimes that's not such a good thing, right? I think we're all quite familiar with the WhatsApp forwards, um, the dubious information that is passed around, and we've seen so much of it over the past couple of years. And the cumulative effect of that is that it undermines trust in these health systems. So, how big of a threat is that, and how can it be effectively tackled?
So Arun, it is a big enough threat, and we saw, and I think we at SPAG Fin were at the forefront of this issue during the COVID time when we worked with WHO, uh,
Mm.
and the whole science of misinformation, rumors, which is now one of the key public health challenges as it has come in, is because of the not the lack of information, but the abundance of information, and how our inability sometimes to filter out what is factually correct versus
Mm-hmm.
what might be a rumor or a misinformation or something which we cannot trust. Now, that's something which is true because of the kind of an open systems which we have, whether it's the social media, peer-to-peer conversation through platforms like WhatsApp or Google. Now, those platforms are there for the goodness of the larger humanity. What's
Mm-hmm.
required is that we need to take a conscious call, as you rightly said. The information flow through trusted sources is important. So the the stakeholders has to sort of invest into building those platforms, where the information is available. Like if I look at a nation and say, if I want to know about a certain disease condition, I don't need to have a certain digital ecosystem where I have a trusted information, but also we need to educate the larger consumers that while you can access information to be more informed and more educated, you do need to have a conversation with the subject matter experts. So you cannot take health in your hand, right? Be more informed, which is very, very important. So if we just look at it, I won't say it's a parallel example, but the larger issues of which right now I saw Google sort of running this whole campaign about educating the people about that don't open a particular link if it's coming from unverified sources, or a couple of months back when it was about the WhatsApp sort of talking about that, verify the authenticity of information before you sort of forward. I think organization needs to do a much more aggressive and a much more sustained campaign to educate the people, so that when they are sourcing information or they're trying to be educated and sensitized about their own health, they are able to make a meaningful distinguish between what is factually correct and what may not be there, and also ensure that they collaborate with the SCPs. So it brings back to the fact of fragmentation, because if everybody is running in their own silo, then we will have these challenges. My outcomes will not be there, because a consumer is thinking that I got information and information I have is correct, so I'm more empowered to take health in my own hands. But they need to collaborate with the HCP, and HCP needs to collaborate with others to sort of say, do I have all the information to provide the right choices to the person who has come to me to seek health?
Yeah, it seems to me that we can't exclude, the platforms and the news sources from health systems either, right? Because they're so critical to how people get information. And this is probably a whole other conversation, I imagine. But, we've seen Facebook and even Twitter to some extent try to tackle the misinformation around healthcare, but much harder to address on private messaging platforms like WhatsApp. But I suspect that is a conversation for another day. Aman, thanks so much for your time. It's really interesting, and I really hope that we will see progress here, because I feel like this is something that in the comms industry, we often focus on specific actors and specific issues without always looking at the bigger ecosystem, as you have done today. So thank you very much again, and hopefully we'll get you back on.
Thanks, Arun, and thanks for taking up this subject, because, as you know, this is something which is very close to me personally, and very close to SPAG. I think as a global organization, we are very much invested in the fact that we need to be, playing a more important and a more critical role in strengthening our health ecosystem. And I think conversations like this could help at least move the needle to some extent.
Indeed. I hope they can. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. Take care.
You've been listening to the PRovoke podcast, brought to you by PRovoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.